All right, not every legal dispute needs to end up in a courtroom, and there are ways to prevent that from happening, according to our next guest from Boughton Law, which, by the way, it's our new on-air legal analyst here at CKNW. Now, we're not telling you what to do. This doesn't constitute legal advice, but we thought, hey, let's ask Wally Oppal a few questions about how we can stay out of the courtroom. Thank you for being here.
It's always good to be with you, Simi.
How's life treating you?
Good. I'm lucky. I'm doing well, and I'm at a good law firm. I'm doing mediations and a whole bunch of stuff, so it's good.
How do you find time? I know because you're still doing a lot of other work too, right?
Yeah,
you're doing inquiry work and
I
policing.
I can't. Once you do an inquiry, people sort of come to you and they think you're an expert on policing and all of those things. So it's tough for me to get away from that. But I'm at Boughton's and I'm mediating cases, which is really a trend now because the justice system is moving towards that way of resolving disputes. So
why do you think that is?
Well, you've mentioned it more than once, inaccessibility of the courts. It's difficult to get into a courtroom. It's expensive to get into a courtroom. Once you get into a courtroom, the atmosphere and the environment can be daunting. I don't know of too many people who are really calm going into a courtroom.
That's true.
And yet we all have disputes to settle, and whether it's a ICBC dispute or a commercial dispute or a family dispute, we need to resolve those disputes. So more and more people are resorting to going outside the courtroom, going to mediation and arbitration and all of those mechanisms that are out there.
Now, do both sides have to be willing to do that, or do people get ordered into mediation? I mean, how does this work?
It's pretty well. You have to agree to do that, and most people want to do that. Particularly in mediation, the environment is so conducive and so friendly to people who have disputes. And so two parties, usually through their lawyers, will pick a mediator, and the job of the mediator is to facilitate discussion and ultimately to reach a conclusion, a settlement. And it's a lot cheaper than going into a courtroom. The Supreme Court is very, very expensive, and it takes a long time to get there. If you're looking at a 5-day trial or a 10-day trial, you're looking a year from now. I had a case on Friday. It was an ICBC case, and it was a 5 to 10-day trial, and they were looking to try it a year from now, and we settled it in less than a day.
Really?
Yeah. So both parties, you do a lot of haggling back and forth, and any settlement that you reach has to be done with the consensus of the people involved. But people usually go away happy.
That's what I was going to ask you. What is the success rate of this?
Well, there are cases that are difficult that can't be settled, but I haven't had one yet. I've got a very difficult one now that I'm doing where I've spent 5 days on it, but I'm confident that we'll settle it. There's a lot of money involved in it, and there are parties involved. Emotions get involved in it. So what you do in a hearing room when you're doing a mediation is that you try to bring the parties together, and you do it in a calm atmosphere. You're in an office, and often you separate the parties in different rooms, and you go back and forth, and emotions get involved a lot.
That's what I was wondering, too.
Yeah.
Like, for you personally, you could probably write a sitcom based on some of the things that you see going on back and forth. And sometimes you must just want to put people in the same room and go, listen, come on, people, let's get this done.
You have to be sometimes harsh at times, but that really isn't what you're supposed to do in a mediation. You want to make sure that the people who go through the process go through and they're pleased at the end of the day. Not everybody is, because it involves a certain amount of compromising. Apologies play a role in it sometimes. When I was in government, we passed the Apology Act. And the Apology Act means that you can apologize without incurring legal liability. It doesn't mean you're legally at fault. And I tell that to the police all the time. If you apologize at the scene for something that's happened, it means probably that the person won't go and lay a complaint against you. And apologies have a wonderful way of mollifying disputes. So it's good.
That's so true. Yeah. So many things could be stopped in their tracks with an apology. Why do you think people, is it the fear of some kind of legal fallout that stops people from that?
I think that's it. And I think that once you apologize, people think that's a sign of weakness. In fact, if you apologize, and I've talked to a lot of police who do this, and they have very difficult jobs to do. If they apologize and the people understand where they're coming from and how difficult their job is, and that people do that. And mediations, often apologies are a part of the process, so it works.
Yeah, I can imagine that too. And you must see that when you see the mediation being successful versus what might have happened if they'd had to take it to court, is it sometimes just things get out of control and this could have been solved a long time ago? People had just sat down and talked to each other.
Yeah, it's particularly so in matrimonial matters where there are so many emotions involved. But if you sit down with the people and you tell them logically, look, if you don't settle this, it's going to mean a 10 or a 15-day trial. Nobody can afford to go into the Supreme Court and have a 15-day trial unless you're very, very rich. And so not a lot of people gain from that. And not only that, but the emotions that are involved. And, I've spent all my life in courtrooms, and I can tell you that they're not good places to be. And if you got a dispute, it's a lot better to settle it outside the courtroom. And many, many lawyers encourage their clients to do that. And that means it's a lot easier for everybody. It's cheaper and it's quicker.
But certain cases, I would imagine, are the ones that are suitable for this. Like not every case. What is it best suited for, do you think?
Well, I think that family cases are usually, I think, ideal cases where you should be going to mediation because, you've got two people, presumably, who are in love with one another at one time. They probably share a common bond in that they have children. They have property together, so it makes sense for them to set aside whether emotional differences that they have and sit down and see how they can iron out their differences. Similarly, in an ICBC dispute where somebody's been injured in a car accident and they're suffering from injuries, and you have to tell them, look, it's better that you settle it now as opposed to going into a courtroom a year from now. And when you go into a courtroom, you're subject to cross-examination. And that's not easy. So you have to sort of give a reality check to people, and and that works. And I've done that. I've done that when I'm doing mediations. I tell them, look. Do
you understand what this means if we don't do this?
So look, I spent a lot of my life in courtrooms, and I can tell you, even for me, a courtroom is not the best place to be. You go there as a last resort, and of course, there are some cases that just can't be settled. And they need the judge to make a decision in order to reach a settlement or a conclusion.
Is this, do you think, having an impact on the system, like more people choosing this less kind of adversarial way?
Absolutely, because there's something like 60,000 lawsuits that are started every year. Only 1% ever go to a courtroom.
Really?
That's
crazy.
And people have to realize that hey, look. We have a dispute, whether it's a business dispute, a commercial, one over a debt or something like that. Let's resolve this thing now as opposed to paying lawyers for the next 6 months or a year. And it's a lot better to do that.
I don't know. Lawyers might not like you saying that.
Because maybe not.
That's not necessarily good either.
Yeah.
Now, but is this available everywhere? Like one of the things that people have criticized about the legal system is that it seems inaccessible to many people when it comes to money. Like if you don't have a lot of money, is this sort of helpful in that regard?
Absolutely. Anybody that's listening out there now that has a dispute should talk to their lawyer and say, look, how can we settle it? I'm prepared to take the dispute to mediation.
And that's not seen as a sign of weakness?
No, not at all. I mean, that's a sign of reality. It's realistic to do that. And let's resolve this thing right now before we spend more money on it and spend more time and expend more emotions on it. So that's the way to do things. It's a wise, logical way of doing things. So anybody can do that. Lawyers are doing it more and more because it's quicker for them, and they can do better financially if they move cases, they settle them and get on to the next one.
Well, then we'd really be on to something.
Right.
If they believe that.
Yeah.
You said that a couple times that you've spent most of your life in a courtroom.
Yeah.
What are some of the changes that you have seen? Like, how has the legal system kind of morphed over time, or has it?
It is changing. I think one of the really good changes that are taking place is a diversity in the court system. And you've got more women being appointed as judges. You got some visible minorities, probably not enough at this stage. That's been a complaint. You have now rules that are more that's more friendly You got judges who are better trained and judges who care more so for people than they did maybe 30 years ago. I hear of horror stories of judges who were arbitrary and made decisions that people didn't like and the way they conducted themselves in a courtroom. But it's all changing, and so you have a different system.
So is there more of an influence, do you think, on sort of society versus what judges are doing versus when you were on the bench? Did you pay attention to what was going on
Absolutely.
out there?
You know, one thing that's really been positive, I think, is the scrutiny of the media. The media pays attention to what happens in courtrooms. You know, long before I got into the system, nobody ever criticized judges. Well, that's not, you know, I've been there now for 35, 40 years, and
you think that's a good thing?
Absolutely, it's a good thing. We should be accountable. The system should be accountable. It's a part of our democracy, and nobody's immune to criticism. And for that reason, the system is more open, and it can be more open. It should be, I think. We still have a lot of media bans and prohibitions on publication and things like that, but that's another question.
Yeah.
And
but that's changing too. Even that you find
is.
Even from 20 years ago when I first started in this business, the change versus what you can report and what you weren't able to report, baby steps.
Yeah, I think sometimes judges and those of us in the system think that the system is too fragile, and we need to protect the public from hearing certain types of evidence. You know, the public is sophisticated, the public is knowledgeable, and the public want to be informed. And I think that people have to respect the public in that fashion.
People want also a more accessible
Absolutely.
system. Like if they don't want to have to use it, but if they need to use it, it should be there.
Now, see, that's what separates us from other societies. We have a democracy where if you have a dispute with someone, you don't get into a physical fight with them. You have mechanism, you have courtrooms, and you have lawyers and other people who will help you, counselors who will help you get on with your life.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Always good to be with you, Simi.
Keep in mind that we weren't telling you what to do with your case. That wasn't legal advice, but we were just having a nice chat about that. That's Wally Oppal, a lawyer with Boughton Law, mediator and arbitrator, and we'll be right back.